I'd like to introduce, obviously, Shaun de Bruyn, very well known to you, who's the Chief Executive of TiCSA, Gina Norman, my colleague to my right, who is the RAA General Manager of Travel and Distribution. She's obviously here in the room with me. Adrian Pederick MP and the member for Hammond, who you can see hopefully on the screen, and the Honourable Zoe Bettison MP, the Shadow Tourism Minister and member of the Labor Party. So we are going to hear from the speakers shortly, but the goal is to maximise the time for Q&A, and as a reminder to use your raise hand function when we get to that. But we also had really great feedback from the participants, and questions have already been submitted, so we will make sure that we open up with those Q&As as well. Don't forget, you can also use the comments and question function in the Zoom chat function as well. So if you do think of a question at any point, feel free to type it in when you think of it, and we'll come back to it during the discussion. So the first speaker, fingers crossed the technology works, and we'll throw to Shaun on the ground in the electorate of Hammond. I'll introduce Shaun, CEO of TiCSA, familiar face to all of you, and you would know that he's got really deep and varied tourism and business experience, relationship management, business planning, destination experience development, and that was certainly a lot of questions about experience development came through beforehand, so I expect we'll touch on that as well as his government relations and strategic management background over 20 years. You know, you're getting old when you start to talk about a career of a couple of decades. So the role of TiCSA is to advocate for you and the 1,000+ members, the wider South Australian tourism industry, and to really strengthen, hopefully, your operations and the regions and grow the visitor economy. So with that, I'll open and invite Shaun to present.
Thanks, Emily. I understand I've got 3 minutes. I've just started my watch to make sure that I keep to that, because I believe you're going to be the timekeeper as well. So thank you to RAA for the partnership. Thank you to Adrian and Zoe for being a part of the event today. We really appreciate the opportunity to have a policy discussion. I'm 20 seconds in, so I'll get cracking. We do a quarterly business survey, and these are the latest results from that survey. You can see that obviously there's been a significant disruption to business as usual as soon as we had bushfires in the end of December 2019, and then COVID hit just as we were recovering from fires, and it's been a real roller coaster, as our graphic illustrates there. The important thing to recognise there is the reality of the business conditions that people are facing, and many of you online will identify with this. So we had 370 businesses respond, so it's a significant survey sample. 64, this is for the October, November, December quarter of activities. 64% said that they had significant downturn in business activity. 42% said that they had reduced staff and operations. Over half are reporting a weaker business activity generally, and 75% were saying that there was low consumer confidence. Now, obviously, we're all seeing that. We know that there are variations in the industry, that some businesses are still going well and having good levels of activity, but we are still in a pandemic, and this is what a state of emergency looks like. So it's just about giving a sense of where we're at and where the vast majority of businesses are telling us that they're at. This next graphic talks about the particular visitor market. So the conference market, business market, festivals and events, leisure market. Over the last quarter, the market that has been hit the hardest is that leisure market, and obviously consumer confidence has dipped, and we've seen a reduction in people's preparedness. The green highlights a decrease, the purple highlights no change, and the grey highlights an increase. So again, that does show that there is some variations, but generally there's, it's a challenging time for tourism businesses. The last slide that I have talks about the TiCSA policy agenda. We went through a 6-month process to develop this, significant consultation with our members, with broader industry and with stakeholder groups. There's 5 key elements there. Driving demand, infrastructure, business capability, that's things that we normally see. But partnerships and collaboration are incredibly important. We know we have 12 government departments that look after elements that impact the tourism industry, and we're very keen to see greater partnerships and collaboration. And the big one for us is restart and reinvestment. Businesses are challenged. Some businesses will need support once we're through the emergency phase of this pandemic and into the recovery phase. Thanks very much, Emily. I think that's my 3 minutes.
That was incredibly punchy. Well done. And it's a great overview and introduction to the role that that TiCSA plays. So I look forward to bringing you into the conversation as part of the discussion. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Gina Norman, who, as I said, is the RAA General Manager of Travel and Distribution. Gina also is old enough to have had 20 years experience in the sector, particularly also in that customer service and retail industries as well. She's an incredibly strong advocate for the industry and really committed not just to the viability, but to the growth of the sector. So I'll introduce Gina into the conversation.
Thank you for the intro. I think it's now 25 years, which is even more disturbing. And thanks for your presentation, Shaun, as well. Some of the people who are online virtually with us today will know and be working with RAA through our travel side of the organisation, but others may be surprised to know that RAA Travel is one of the longest running agencies in the state. And we've been helping South Australians travel for more than 60 years. But that also means supporting our tourism operators like you. The last 2 years has been incredibly tough for the industry. I don't know of anyone that hasn't had tough times during this. And today's about giving you the opportunity to ask your local politicians about what supports there are for tourism in your region and what the pathway to recovery looks like for your business. At RAA, we want to see the tourism sector return to the vibrant and growing sector it's known for being. And it's why we've partnered with TiCSA in order to amplify our voice and support tourism businesses and operators like yourselves to grow the visitor economy in South Australia. To be travel ready post-COVID and through COVID, we really need to make it easy and safe for people to travel around SA. Despite COVID-19, strong intrastate travel has meant that some regions have experienced strong activity, but it's also in that strong activity that it's revealed certain infrastructure problems in regional SA. That's why when the government introduced the Local Government Infrastructure Partnership Program, we really welcomed it. Now we want it to continue. So we want to see the next state government commit to an ongoing regional tourism grant program to support upgrades to town centres and local infrastructure. We also recognise that roads need to be safe and they need to be well maintained so people can get to your fantastic tourist destinations. To do this, we're calling for a 4-year road maintenance fund with a minimum value of $600 million to be put towards transparent road maintenance funding and improve road safety. And closer to the Hammond electorate, we're advocating for full duplication of Dukes Highway with a focus on prioritising the section between Taylor Bend and Mallee Highway. We're also calling for the commitment of installing additional overtaking lanes on Alexandrina Road. Improving access via infrastructure is just one piece of the puzzle. Really, we need updating, repairing and extending visitor signage as a priority across all regions and improvements to visitor infrastructure such as improved rest areas and facilities. So lastly, we know the key to recovery of the tourism sector is a skilled workforce. In a RAA survey, operators identified recruiting and retaining staff as the #1 barrier to growing their business. Lack of international workers, along with job security, housing supply, adequate training and upskilling are just some of the issues driving the growing capacity constraints. It's clear that issues driving skills shortages are multifaceted and require a whole of government response. We are calling for a state strategy with specific regional tourism employment plans to respond to growing skill shortages and to rebuild operator capacity. This is vital so that the sector can be more sustainable and resilient in the future and, of course, grow. I know it has been and it continues to be incredibly tough for you as tourism operators. What we do see that has shone through is the incredible resilience of the industry and those working in it. And I really look forward to working with you and supporting you to help grow the visitor economy. Thanks.
Thank you. And skills is another area that came through strongly in the questions too, so we look forward to the discussion in that area. With that, I will introduce Adrian, our first special guest. And I know we're looking forward to hearing from you. Adrian was elected as the member for Hammond in 2006, and he's had a range of portfolios, shadow portfolios around agriculture, food and fisheries, forests, obviously strong interest in the Murray, sustainability and climate change and mineral resources. I know that his personal interest includes Aussie rules, as it should, as well as lawn bowls and camping with his family, and he's very actively involved in local community, particularly as a CFS member, amongst other things. So Adrian, I'll throw it open to you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily, and hello, everyone. Okay, I've got 3 minutes. So the South Australian Government and the South Australian Tourism Commission continues to do everything it can to support our state's visitor economy and the thousands of people it employs. We are focusing on returning to our record high $8.1 billion visitor economy, which was pre-COVID. South Australian tourism was at its highest value ever on record and well on track to reach the 2030 goal of $12.8 billion early. June 2021 marked the 7th consecutive month where regional South Australia enjoyed a record individual monthly result for room nights occupied and takings. In the 12 months to June 2021, South Australia's total visitor expenditure recovered to $5.8 billion, well ahead of the SATC's impact forecast of $4.9 billion. These results also showed in the 12 months to June 2021, and this includes intrastate expenditure increased 29% to a record high $2.6 billion. So obviously that's people travelling internally, and I experienced that a lot myself touring around the state. Intrastate visitation grew 14% to 4.9 million visits, the third highest result on record, and regional visitor expenditure grew to $3.5 billion, up 25% and nearing pre-COVID levels. The Murray River Lakes and Coorong area saw 335,000 domestic overnight visitors for the year ending March 2021, and 779,000 day trips were taken to the Murray River Lakes and Coorong for the year, with a spend of $54 million. And we as a government, excuse me, have supported this all with the Great State Voucher Scheme, which is a proven tourism stimulus program, which has received overwhelmingly positive feedback from industry, and the 6 rounds that have been completed have generated an estimated economic impact of $90 million. Analysis of previous rounds of the voucher scheme shows it creates additional expenditure over and above the voucher booking, which averages out at $597 in regional South Australia, and the average consumer spending in round 3 was $499 when booking a tour experience with a $100 voucher, and an average $1,660 spent with a $200 voucher. And in regards to the Tourism Development Fund, there's been a total of 111 tourism development projects have been granted funding under the Tourism Industry Development Fund. And there's also been marketing support put in by our government, the Liberal government, to support the regions in the context of COVID recovery, with the 11 regional tourism organisations receiving an additional $10,000 under the Regional Consumer Cooperative Marketing Fund. And this was in addition to the annual $20,000 provided under the fund aimed at attracting visitors. And in regards to events, an additional $1 million has been committed for regional events, and round 1 of the 2021-22 Regional Event Fund is supporting 37 regional events, including 16 events receiving support through the fund for the first time, and 8 which are entirely new events to South Australia. And certainly in regards to responding to the comments about the Dukes Highway, I couldn't agree more that it needs to be duplicated. My property is split by the Dukes Highway at Coomanduk, where I live. And I remember going to the Public Works Committee of the Parliament many years ago now, when there was $100 million spent on the 1,200 mil wide sections put in the middle of the road, and also more overtaking lanes. Yes, it is an improvement, but it is a B-grade improvement compared to what it could be. And we are certainly doing a study for that first 5 kilometres out to the Mallee Highway from Tailem Bend, noting that obviously that's going to be reasonably expensive with a railway bridge there. But I know for some initial inquiries, and I fully concur it needs to be done, it is at least a $3 billion project, but it is the fourth busiest highway, I believe, in the country. So I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I should have said earlier too that Charles Mountain, who is an even more familiar face to you than Shaun, probably from seeing him on the TV, is available too for the Q&A. So if you have from our area, so Charles is our Senior Manager of Road Safety and Infrastructure. So if you've got specific questions about roads and infrastructure, we can bring Charles into the conversation as well. So thank you very much, Adrian. And a beautiful electorate, particularly with Strathalbyn and Langhorne Creek and Wellington. It's a beautiful part of the world. So we look forward to hearing from the operators during the Q&A. And I would like to spend more time there and less time juggling my children with homeschooling, but that's a separate issue. I'd now like to welcome the Honourable Zoe Bettison, Shadow Minister for Tourism, and I'd also like to thank Zoe she's been very generous with her time. Gina and I have met Zoe on a number of occasions to talk about some of the policies in her area. So Zoe was elected to the South Australian Parliament as the member for Ramsay in 2012. Whyalla born and bred, and Zoe worked for iconic Australian tourism operator and was the Director of Public Affairs too before entering into state politics. Zoe believes that increased international trade and tourism with the world will ultimately bring obviously more jobs and opportunities for us here in South Australia. So I'll welcome Zoe into the conversation.
Thank you very much, Emily, and I thank RAA and TiCSA for the opportunity to speak. Let me acknowledge my parliamentary colleague, Adrian, who does talk about his region a lot. I can back him up on that and encourages us to visit as often. Look, I'm just going to start by saying this isn't the summer that we all hoped for. When I caught up with TiCSA probably in about October last year, we felt that there might be an opportunity to have a fantastic summer. And unfortunately, we haven't seen that way. When I've talked to people, we had quite a busy Christmas and New Year period, and then it's been very, very quiet ever since. What we're seeing in business, and I guess in families, is still this incredible uncertainty about our safety. And although we love travelling in our own state, we've seen that impact, unfortunately, again, as we head into the 2-year mark of COVID. Now, there are several things that we've done in opposition that I'm very proud of. And we advocated for the tourism vouchers back in June 2020. And now we're coming up with, I think you said, the 7 and 8 rounds. And I continue to hear from people, particularly in the experiences sector, that those tourism vouchers really open people's eyes to the opportunity and the diversity of tourism product here in South Australia. Now, of course, recently we've come out again calling what we would do if we were the government. And one of the key things that we've heard time and time again from business is that there's no immediate support when you have restrictions. So we've proposed that if you had up to 50% of restrictions, that there would be an automatic daily payment. We've had really good feedback on that. And of course, we've also continued to call for Commonwealth support for JobKeeper, particularly for tourism and hospitality and the arts industry, who continue to be dramatically impacted by COVID. Now, unfortunately, I often have to point out the negatives in opposition. And I started this Tourism Equals Jobs campaign in 2019 after we've had dramatic cuts in the budget. And of course, that was $11 million out of the South Australian Tourism Commission budget straight up. Then the following year, we had another 12 million over the forward estimates. And if you look at the forward plan for the budget, every single year we go ahead is another cut to the Tourism Commission. So I know, and you know, that tourism equals jobs, but this Liberal government has continued to cut and cut the budget. Now, when we build back, we're going to be competing with the rest of Australia and internationally for a destination. And we know that the competition is going to be severe. So can I recognise that you won the Murray River Lakes and Coorong Tourism the Destination Marketing Prize, the Tourism Board. Well done, Jill. I have to say that it was you're very professional in how you communicate and collaborate within your area. I think Lake Breeze also won the Best of Tourism Wine as well. Can I touch on the fact that you've had substantial private investment, the Bridgeport Hotel, the Bend. Adrian, I think this is one of yours, the Bridges Event Centre that you advocated for. And of course, you've got your new products as well, the River Murray International Dark Sky Reserve was declared and the Murray Coorong Trail. When I talk to other people, there's exciting things ahead, like the Cable Ski Park and the Narrandjeri land, and looking at a trail there as well. So there's a lot that can happen in your area. I think it's in a very, very exciting time for your region. Not only we've got great developments at Monarto, but your closeness to the city and the access to the city makes it an incredible day trip. Now, we'll be announcing our tourism policy in the very near future. A key focus of mine will be marketing to build back, but of course with event support and also business development. TiCSA and RAA have told us what they would like, and we've been listening, and you'll hear us in our policy respond to those requests.
Thank you, Zoe. That's great, and really appreciated the shout out to the operators, who are hopefully some of whom are on the call with us today. So what we'd like to do now is open up the Q&A, which is really the most valuable part of the session. So a reminder to use the Zoom chat function if you would like to do that, or raise your hand. And while we do that, I'll ask one of the first questions, if I may, and I'll ask it both to Adrian and Zoe. Perhaps Zoe, if you'd like to go first while we've still got your line open. What do you see as the tourism priorities specifically for the electorate of Hammond?
Well, I think not enough people know about Hammond. Adrian has done a very good job, but you've got a real diversity of options now. When I think about the Dark Sky Reserve, and so you've got international attraction to that, it's the first of only 18 in the world. This is something we should be shouting to the rooftops. But I think that we want people to linger longer. So not just have that day trip, but to stay at the Bridgeport Hotel, which the Labor caucus came up, and we stayed a night there and had a wonderful evening. But the beauty of the area as well. And I think the trail will attract people who want to linger longer. We know that tourism is a great employer. And I have to say, I was really impressed by hearing about some of the collaborative staffing arrangements that were trying to be garnered with the Bridgeport Hotel. I understand that they had a local recruitment policy and really supported people with traineeships. And I think there's a lot of growth and potentially looking at as a project about how do we look at staffing from a regional perspective. I know in KI that often people work in 2 or 3 different tourism businesses because they love the industry, but they can't get full-time with one business. So I think Hammond's got a lot to offer.
Fabulous. Adrian, I'll bring you into the conversation.
Yeah, we're on.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. Look, Hammond does have a lot to offer, and there's a very broad spectrum of things that people can do in Hammond. I mean, the River Murray, right up the full length of the River Murray, can contribute in 1 year $500 million of spending, and we've noticed so much more water sports, which at times can create its problem, as we've seen recently in the media, but we have to work with that as well. And it's not just the Bridgeport Hotel, which I chased for nearly 10 years before we got that build coming, but it's the collaboration that's happening out here. And I know that one of the triggers to get that built was that the owners there talked to Sam Shahin and his group, and Sam basically said, I need more rooms. I've only got 100 rooms out at the motorsport park. But it's also the desire of operators to work together so that we can promote places like, whether it's Bleasdale, Bremerton, Lake Breeze, Kimbolton, and the raft of other wineries at Langhorne Creek, so that people can enjoy that visitor experience. You know, someone can you can have, say, a family go to the motorsport park for an event over the weekend, but not everyone wants to see the cars, so they can go out and see the wineries, or they can come to the horse racing out at Gifford Hill, out at the Bridges Event Centre, or we've got the greyhounds here in Murray Bridge as well, or it is the nature-based tourism with the Coorong Trail or the Lavender Trail, which we're making sure can be kept linked up with the sale of some land into the future. So there is a vast amount of opportunity out here, and I think we just need to look at more options for accommodation possibilities, especially in the Langong Creek region. And I do like the idea of the collaboration, that we can become the convention centre of regional South Australia with the opportunities we've got, even in these COVID times.
Thank you very much. I might bring Shaun and Gina into the conversation, particularly from an advocacy point of view. Obviously, both of our organisations have been talking to the government around investing in the tourism recovery. What does this look like? What is it that we're advocating for specifically, and how can we start to grow the visitor economy? Shaun, I'll invite you in.
So one of our 5 key pillars as part of the election campaign, and that we're keen for Liberal and Labor Party to consider as part of their election promises, is a recovery program. What we've seen with many tourism businesses, due to the length and extent of the pandemic, it has had a severe impact. Many businesses have lost good people. They've lost people that are well trained. They've gone into other industry sectors with less volatility. We've seen that potentially infrastructure has been sold down, and then many of those businesses have well and truly used cash reserves and potentially gone into significant debt. So as we move into recovery, those businesses are going to need support to actually invest in their future visitation, their future marketing, their future operations, refresh and renew infrastructure and things like that. So we're very keen for both parties to consider a recovery fund where tourism business owners can go to the government and say, I want to invest in a marketing campaign that looks like this. I want to invest in infrastructure. I want to invest in getting the right people into my business. I haven't got the capability to be able to do all of that investment myself due to the nature of the challenges that business has faced, or we've seen across the whole of the state during this pandemic. And the government will be in a position where they can support those businesses with a financial grant, which will help them help themselves. So we're very much looking for both parties to consider that as one of their policy platforms.
Gina, would you add anything further specific in the visitor economy space?
Yeah, well, just from a staffing perspective, of the promotion of the tourism industry as a desired industry, that we actually need a whole of state strategy around the promotion of tourism, the skills shortages, and the opportunity for people to earn qualifications as well, that they can see then a lifelong journey in tourism, rather than it being a job whilst you're starting to go to somewhere else, that people actually see an opportunity for a career within tourism that will only come from, one, an attraction piece, and two, a skills development piece.
Right. We might, on the skills, it's probably a good segue into one of the questions that we've received in advance of the session. So just a reminder, please put up your hand. We'll make sure, and if we've missed you, give us a shout out. But one of the questions we received was, finding suitable employees for tourism and hospitality is extremely difficult. How can we improve this? The Tourism Industry Development Fund had provided many businesses with fantastic opportunity to enhance their infrastructure, with many projects nearing completion, but where is the workforce coming from to run these new experiences? So I'll perhaps, Adrian, if I first this time on the skills shortage and what we can do.
Look, obviously this has been heavily impacted by the lack of the availability of backpackers, and obviously students have also been involved in different jobs in the tourism sector, but certainly in regards to what happened at the Bridgeport, Christine Willersdorf here locally was heavily involved with some state and federal funding, which assisted in the training of 52 long-term unemployed, and many of those people are still working there. And that was, and I remember visiting this group, and you could see these people, that a lot of these people had never had this opportunity before. So I think programs like that are what we're going to need to drive it into the future. Not everyone's on top of that is going to have a university degree career. So there are many options available, and we need to drive that thinking forward. Training and more training is the key, and there are so many opportunities right across the sector in what people can achieve, and I just think that is a vital part of it, but also working with federal immigration strategies. And I note that we're just slowly opening up to backpackers as I speak, but it's been tough. We haven't had people able to come into the country, which has affected not just tourism, but a whole range of industries.
Zoe.
Look, we hear this in many of the regions. Obviously, there are challenges also in the meatworks and in picking fruit in the agriculture industries. I think what we need to do is really target the opportunity for people to understand the great joy that people have working in the tourism industry. And if you like working with people and you want to see South Australia, you should have your gap year in South Australia. And it's not just people doing it that temporary year, but to develop an understanding of what our regions have to offer. I'm really keen for us to collaborate together on this. I think that it's a real challenge that will hold us back for getting back to that $8.1 billion that we've reached in 2019 for our visitor economy if we don't focus on skills and recruitment. So TiCSA has raised this with me a lot, and I think we really have to work together on how we can encourage people into this industry. You don't need me to tell you the fact that many people who've worked in this industry for a long time have left. And many business owners have said to me, I can't believe it, they're my best staff member, but I can't keep them on, particularly when JobKeeper ended. And so we have seen people exiting this industry with enormous experience and skills. Some will come back because they love the industry, but there is certainly, this is one of the key issues that we have. All the marketing in the world for a destination, we will let ourselves down if we then can't deliver those services.
Definitely, and it's a challenge that obviously we've had here, but RAA in a unique position to have opportunities to redeploy them, and we know that that is just simply not the case for the vast majority of operators, and trying to attract people back into the industry is an incredible challenge once you've left. Shaun, a question that's come in for you that again is skills, sort of centres around skills, but one of the questions was, we would like to employ more local people. So any information you can give us about experience development locally would be of interest. So looking for ways to create new opportunities through experiences. Did you have any insights you'd like to share on that?
I think, yeah, the other piece around skills for us, and we hear from industry, is that there is a piece around skills for traineeships and apprenticeships, and we think there's a lot of there's been a lot of emphasis on that, and there's been a lot of focus on it, and there's definitely a lot of apprenticeships and traineeships going through in traditional sectors. Tourism hospitality, that works, but for SME tourism operators, apprenticeships and traineeships aren't as relevant. They are still relevant, but they're not as relevant. And so we need some capability activity as well. And that's obviously a space that TiCSA works, RDAs work, local government works, different employment agencies work in as well. But that business capability piece is a really fundamental part to getting tourism moving. And it's not a big investment area, but it is a strategic investment in workshops where small business owners and key staff will give out maybe half a day to attend a workshop to learn a new skill that they can instantly apply back into their business so they can be more financially sustainable. So I think that's a key issue that we constantly hear from our members, Emily, and consistently around the state.
I might put Gina on the spot on this one. So even though it was a specific experience question to you, Shaun, I know that Gina's team does a lot of work with operators in trying to promote and make available those connect people to experiences too. Is there any insights that you'd share from the RAA travel business?
Yes, so from an experience development, we have a platform and it gives an opportunity for distribution of those experiences where small operators and small local operators might not have the ability to distribute their product easily. And so by being able to do it, and it's not at a cost, it's only a commissionable product. And so it doesn't cost anything to launch that product and to have it out for our member base to purchase from. It's an easy and affordable way to increase that distribution, which then increases the opportunity for filling those seats or filling that experience. And then that obviously comes with being able to employ people locally to be able to take that experience or facilitate that experience.
We don't want South Australia to be the best kept secret anymore. That time is over, hopefully. I'd like to ask a question about on the demand side, and both to Adrian and Zoe. Perhaps we'll come to you, Adrian, first. And it picks up the point that you made, Shaun, in your presentation around consumer confidence and that sort of outlook. So one of the questions we had was, how do you propose we rebuild consumer confidence in a way that's safe and we encourage visitors to book ahead and visit the regions, knowing that that's a real challenge in terms of the lead time of people's people feeling nervous about booking things in advance when things can change so rapidly?
Well, certainly there needs to be some flexibility with operators, and I've certainly heard of people that have lost a fair bit of money in relation to maybe an Airbnb experience, for example. That there does need to be a bit of flexibility in the sector, I believe, but certainly in rebuilding consumer confidence. I was talking about the Great State Voucher Scheme. We're in rounds 7 and 8 have just been announced, and they do form a key part of our latest business support package, and the largest number of these packages are available for both local and interstate travellers, and it does support our plan to provide stimulus to the state's tourism industry, and this is part of a $50 million support package right across the state, obviously not just in Hammond, and we acknowledge businesses, whether it's hospitality, tourism, everyone's been hit hard by Omicron, and this is also in addition to the $40 million grant that was announced in December in response to the restrictions that were required to keep our communities safe. And in regards to the Regional Event Fund, there's been an additional $1 million invested there to support local events, in the understanding that events keep people longer in the region. And I also note that we've just given an uplift up to 50% for hospitality. That is a major boon. You know, obviously people were suffering under the 25%. That's pretty obvious to see. And it's tough, and it's a fine line between keeping people healthy and allowing visitation. I mean, I visited Robe soon after New Year's Eve, and I think potentially the New Year's Eve staff at both hotels were sacrificial lambs, because both staff are on skeletons, both pubs are on skeleton staff for the next 10 days for obvious reasons. But you know, they worked through it, and I had conversations with some of the people down there, and they just worked around it. And I don't think that the area suffered more than it needed to. In fact, it was still thriving with a great visitor economy. And I think people are adapting under restrictions as they go, but it's as we come out of COVID, as we lift them, that will be a natural boon for operators as well.
Right. Zoe, consumer confidence.
I do think that the consumer confidence will come back as people start to get their third boosters. If I'm honest with you, I think there is some hesitation to see with children returning to school, whether that will be a second wave for us, and it will just be a little bit of time over the next few weeks to see how that happens. But I do think that confidence will come back. What we did see during these 2 years is South Australia's really enjoying their own backyard. Now, of course, it was a little patchy. Some regions did really well. Clare, for example, is the best they'd ever been. But other regions didn't find that, or they had some successful times of the year and then it was quiet again. So I think that people have heard enough of being adaptable and agile and pivot. You know, they've pivoted and pivoted and pivoted. And I guess I'm really conscious that often we're talking about family businesses, very small businesses, people working in the business all the time. But I have confidence that this is a fantastic industry and we have a lot to offer. So I really do think that we will build back and hopefully build back better. And I do think, I think TV shows like what Cosy did on the weekend and Adelaide, I think the work that the RAA does in promoting our regions is actually working. And I do think we just need to keep reminding people, you know, have you been to Manato? Have you seen the Lion exhibit? Have you gone up to see the Bridgeport Hotel? Have you been to the Bend? Just to keep reminding people what we have in our own backyard. As soon as they start to feel safer, they will travel.
Thanks, Zoe. Good points. Now, Kelly, I'm going to invite you to ask your 4-part question if we can get the technology, if we can open up. Otherwise, I'm happy to read it for you.
That's okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. I firstly just acknowledge everybody that's speaking today, the RAA. It's really good to have you hosting and our leaders in the community. It's a very difficult time to be leaders and hear the stories of everyone struggling. So thanks to Shaun and to Adrian and Zoe. I think as you've talked about the Great State Voucher, that was a big lifeline for our business. I'm a tour operator, and so it's not just myself personally, but people out in the regions that I take people to visit. So hearing a lot of those stories, it's tourism is dying without tourists, and we are feeling like we've exhausted the weekend South Australian market. Most people are working during the week, so that's very challenging for us as businesses to not have that midweek visitation, and that's across the board of hospitality and all sorts. So whilst the Great State Voucher is an absolute lifeline, it was for our business last time, I think the next round is also, we're rejoicing about that too, but it's probably just getting to the point where what else can we do? So that I'd like to be able to thinking about the international market, and I know that Sarah's asked that question from Zoos SA coming in as well, so it's on her mind, but you know, what are the plans about the international market and particularly New Zealand that's important to our region? That's my first question.
Why don't we go to Adrian? I can hear your voice on that one first, and then we'll throw to Zoe.
Yeah, look, thanks, Emily, and that is a very, very serious issue. And look, Scott Morrison and the federal team are looking up to opening up the international borders as soon as possible. Obviously, we've got a very close relationship with New Zealand, and I know Kelly gets a lot of her custom from New Zealanders. And look, I think it's full throttle, as much full throttle as we can be in looking at when it is safe to open up borders. We've taken down restrictions on how people enter the country, but it is going to take time. And yes, I'm as keen as anyone to get more people here. It was talked about before about getting people and these shortages for other industries like meatworks. And we were helped out the other day by nearly 90 of these islanders, Pacific Islanders, coming across, and they all happen to be in Medi hotels at the minute because there's a little bit of COVID on the plane, and so they've all had to isolate. And so that's the real life issues that we deal with. I mean, that's another sector, but we do have to just keep on it, keep promoting hard overseas. And I know the federal government are working very hard with the international players, international transport operators like Qantas and the others, to see where we go to in opening those international borders right up. And obviously at the state level, we have to work in with the state restrictions. I believe we are over the hump with Omicron. We've got to be careful, but look, as more and more people get their booster shots, and we've got to see what happens into the future, whether or not we'll need a fourth shot, and that may go on. But I think that will generate its own positivity down the track. It is going to take a bit of time, but it's just a matter of everyone doing what they can at whatever level, whether it's state and federally, to attract that international visitation, and not just the visitation, the student cohort coming back, and obviously the vital backpackers that aren't just vital as tourists, but obviously working in the tourist sector and other sectors as well.
Thank you. Zoe, what was Labor's perspective on this one?
Well, look, one of our challenges going forward, that in the past we only got 4% of Australia's international tourists. So there is certainly room for us to grow. So Kelly, when I think about your business, I think about your tours, I think that there's great potential in the future. Can I just say that when the bubble was open with New Zealand, we really didn't take full advantage of that. When you compare to the other states, we were underdone. So the one thing I see at this moment is when opportunities arrive, we really need to be very quick to capture that. Now, unfortunately, that bubble didn't last as long as we all hoped, but we were a bit underdone. Look, getting the direct flights back will be one of my key things to focus on if we're so fortunate to be elected in 45 days. But I have to give the federal government some credit in the fact that they began the IFAM, which was the International Freight Assistance Mechanism, which enabled us to have international flights going predominantly for freight, which would have helped your area. But that just meant we continued to have people moving around internationally, even when the borders were shut. Now we need to build back, because we had quite a few direct flights to China, and of course to the Emirates that were here as well. And so that will be the first course of business as soon as those international borders open up, to build back to what we had, and then let's build it further as well.
Kelly, can we invite you back in to finish the other parts of your questions? I'm noting as well that the connection, I think other people are interested in that question around additional rounds of development fund grants, and also we are about to launch at RAA our first reconciliation action plan, so I'm very keen to hear you ask your question about cultural tourism opportunities and potential collaboration.
Thank you. Yes, so understanding that there's an election coming, obviously, and this is not a guaranteed question or answer, but the Tourism Industry Development Fund was significantly popular, but the time frames and everything, and it's many of us in this region that missed out, and the funds were exhausted, but obviously just indicates that there is a real need for that. And I think Sarah also in the next question has talked about the dollar for dollar funding prohibiting a lot of that. So, you know, a very attractive fund. And it's just really interested to know if there's any policy or involvement or plans on that one.
Adrian, who's leaning in.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, well, look, in regards to that, yes, that fund was taken up rather quickly, and I can explore what we're doing with that into the future as far as opportunities there. But I also want to acknowledge the opportunities we've given, whether it's with the Regional Growth Fund. I know that Bremerton and Lake Breeze both benefited from that as wineries, but also in the broader picture, the work as part of the $18 billion infrastructure build across the state. I know it was mentioned earlier in the piece about roads. I've never seen so many roadworks in the state, and it doesn't matter where you are, and obviously up north there needs to be some at the moment, but those pastoral lands are really going to surge, and that's going to drive a lot of northern tourism down the track. But certainly that's something I'll take on board and get that message back to our team to see where we can factor that in to help with those strategies moving forward. But there's also a whole range of other grant funding opportunities that are there as well.
From a policy and election platform point of view, Zoe, is there something you'd like to add from your side?
Well, look, I have to say I did have some criticism when it first came out. There is no doubt at all that with 111 projects going ahead. It was extensive, but you did have to have a certain amount of cash on hand to even participate. I think it was nearly about, you had to have about 70,000. And for many of the people involved in our tourism industry, they simply didn't have that money available to participate. So my first port of call, while recognising that it has supported lots of different projects, is to understand the cohorts of groups that just weren't even eligible to apply. Because I had quite a few phone calls at the time when people said to me, there's some really key things that I could do and to match the funding, but I simply have already used up all my cash reserves trying to survive. So I think there's some positives about the fund and how it's worked, and I think that's something to consider. But there are also some concerns about where we are at and where the industry is at, and looking at the industry holistically, because I do think it tended to support people who already had significant assets that were there. But I think any time we can support the industry for development is a positive thing for our state. But I certainly would like to look at it in more depth before we make some decisions about the next steps.
Can I just jump in there? I'm keen, I know we've got Bill Neame here online and he's posted a comment about Dark Skies Reserves, but as the Regional Tourism Manager, Bill, I'm wondering if I can put you on the spot for a comment on how tourism's going and what you think the policy setting should be moving forward on any, on the policy priorities or the policy settings moving forward.
Thanks, Shaun. Hi, everyone. First, I'd like to say to Emily, I'm glad I'm in isolation here of being a close contact, because if I go out, I might slip my wrist, because I've been involved for 45 years in travel and tourism. So if 20 years is a lot, I'm in big trouble, aren't I? But on a serious note, some really salient points have been raised. Zoe mentioned the International Dark Sky Reserve. There's a classic example of, here we have a good operator like Kelly Coon, who we've just heard from. If there's clouds and things and she has to cancel a tour, it's a real ask. And there's been a report put out by Dr. Claire Ellister, which was instigated by the Mid-Murray Council, which clearly shows we need a planetarium / observatory or something that will actually be another experience in the region. So we're not just reliant on the actual clouds ruining the tour, or ruining the opportunity for someone to invest in accommodation because it's too risky. So here we have pretty well everyone agreeing that we need an observatory and planetarium. And this is not a go at the current government, Adrian, it's more how government processes work. And I'd like to get you and Zoe's comments on it. So we've got Trade and Investment interested. We've got the Department of Environment and Water interested. We've got the SA Tourism Commission interested. We've got the Premier, because tourism's his portfolio, interested. We do as part of the regional visitor strategy, we were asked infrastructure priorities. Councils and regional development boards then put in other infrastructure priorities. And basically what happens, it goes all around in circles, that we actually don't get, honed in to what actually is a consistent and collaborative approach in respect to, for example, what infrastructure is required, what grants are required. Today we were advised that PIRSA, there's another government department involved. PIRSA are putting out another fund, and if you read one of the streams of it, it basically repeats nearly exactly what the SA Tourism Commission was doing in their Tourism Industry Development Fund, and yet there appears to be some sort of isolation or silos in respect to the communication between the two government agencies. So my question is, how do we simplify, and it's not about being pro-Labor or Liberal, it's simply in government, how do we simplify to actually get some practical actions when we've identified key priorities?
Zoe, do you want to take that one first?
Well, I think you bring up some key issues, Bill. I think it starts with an idea and then it develops from there. And I think what I'm hearing is your frustration is when we have a collective understanding that this is the best way to go, what's next? And I thought that the regional tourism strategy was an incredibly good document. I know that it was very thoroughly researched and a lot of work with the regions. When it was updated, we'd gone a little bit further, but not a lot. I'm a big believer in what I call catalyst products for regions. And it's not because that's the best product there's ever. What we want something is to turn people's heads. That's outstanding, that makes them go to that region. And I think what you're saying is that we have this opportunity here in your region. This is exceptional. This is a standout. How do we take that to the next step? And when I consider what SA Zoos has done, or Zoos SA has done with Monarto, and they've had some private investment to come in with that accommodation, it's not entirely government that can make these things happen. But what you need is leadership. And what you need is a decision made that this is the best way forward, and for that leadership to pursue that project. And I don't think that it's just government's role to finance that, but it certainly is government's role to support the leadership and potentially lead on it as well. I think we can do it better. I think we've got some great products that we've seen have been real draw cards through the state. People have different views about the cube, but it's certainly got people's attention. And people came to South Australia because of that product. And I think that's something that we have to look at in the future. What are those products, not just in the city, but in each of the regions, that make someone say, I want to go to Adelaide, I want to go to South Australia because I want to see that and I want to experience that. And we have to work more collaboratively and push these things forward.
Adrian, did you have any other comments on that one?
Yeah, look, just on that one, I think there is a fair amount of collaboration that already goes on, but I note the silos comment. But certainly if there's something in the arts sector, tourism works with the arts sector. If there's something to do with nature-based trails, etc., work with the Department of Environment and Water, and obviously with skills, work with the Department of Innovation and Skills. And certainly I welcome the investment, as we've been talking about, Monarto Safari Park, $40 million by Jerry Ryan from JCO. And, that's co-teamed with both federal and state government funding in regards to the $15 million new visitor centre that's pretty well ready to go as we speak. So I think it is a combination of investment along the way. And I note that, we've assisted, whether it's out at Gifford Hill at the Bridges Event Centre, we've done some community infrastructure work with the roadworks into the Bend Motorsport Park. And as I said before, we've assisted other businesses with other grant funding opportunities, and certainly something at the Dark Sky Initiative, absolutely. If there was a good commercial proposal that come ahead, what we can do as a state government, and what I could urge my federal government colleagues to do as well, is get on board, work with a private operator and get something going there. But I get back to the zoo issue. Just fantastic what they've done with the Line 360, and it's just going to get bigger and better. But it is absolutely vital to have that private investment as well, but also government working alongside. Great,
thank you. With that, I think Sarah from Zoos SA, thank you for your questions. Hopefully we've covered those too, because of the alignment with the questions that Kelly was asking, and obviously Bill joining the conversation. So I thank you, Bill, for your questions and your observations as well. That's been great. I might wrap up there and thank everyone for your participation. It's been a really fantastic discussion, and having those questions submitted ahead of time was really useful, and hopefully you felt it was effective using the technology that we had, although it would have been great to see you all in person. So that really concludes this Why Tourism Matters session. Our speakers are happy for you to contact them if you've got any follow-up questions. So we'll share those details along with a short survey to get your feedback from the program, and keen to implement the lessons learned and the feedback that we get for the other sessions. And more importantly, we're looking forward to spending time in Hammond and coming and seeing some of these fantastic experiences and new projects that you've got. So thank you very much for the opportunity to connect with you and for sharing your feedback.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.